Hello, and welcome back to Resident Evil 0. Thank you very much for being here. Go ahead and leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. And let me tell you that I hope you've had an excellent week so far, and then, we got one more day till Friday, and then you got the weekend. So anyways, today, as we progress deeper within this semi-abandoned training facility, I want to finally cover the topic of one of the non-canonical games, Resident Evil Gaiden. Now, I can vaguely recall seeing an advertisement for it in a game magazine years ago, and then it completely slipped my mind until I kind of rediscovered it when I was doing my research into the non-canonical games, about, what was out there. And so what about this game that I honestly forgot about made me want to look into it enough to make it a standalone script? Well, check out the box art. This is the box cover for Resident Evil Gaiden, and as you can see, it was a Game Boy Color game. I know it seems odd to choose, but you have to remember, this is your first portable console Resident Evil game. I believe there might have been one other one that was released beforehand, but it wasn't like a portable console. It was one of those like Tiger Electronic deals. The other reason why I want to look at this is that it was also the first game released by a company that was not Capcom. The company that released this game was the gaming studio of M4 Limited. This studio is no longer around. But when it was a British video game developer. It was founded in 1995, and they produced some screensavers. There was a Tasmanian Devil game that they put out, as well as like an Olsen Twins game. They had other games and other games media that they were involved with, but in 2001, they released Resident Evil Gaiden. Not long after, in the following year, they did close their doors in 2002. So, from what I can tell, one of the last games that they released was Gaiden. This game was not handled by Capcom, as I said, but does not mean that Capcom left them to the wolves. Resident Evil father, Shinji Mikami, was involved as an advisor to the company, and a gentleman who was a producer for both the Resident Evil game and for Resident Evil Code Veronica, as well as a writer for the Wesker's Report, wrote the story for Resident Evil Gaiden. So M4 Limited did have some pretty decent knowledge base to pull off of. Now, even though they had this decent backing, the game was actually released to mixed reviews. Most of the scores were usually around 3.5 out of 5 or 4 or 5 out of 5. So usually about average, middle of the line. That does not mean that it stayed that way. This game is now usually listed in the groups that have played it for like Game Boy Color games as one of those top 10 Game Boy Color games that you should at least try out, such as Retro Gamer. Now, before we talk about story, I've got a bunch of other stuff that I want to talk about first, such as the graphics. Now, graphics don't make a game. I think story and fun is much more important than graphics. In fact, you can see that in games like, but in a lot of these retro indie type games, right, where it's much more 8-bit style, but the gameplay is a lot of fun and all that kind of stuff, and so they take off and they do relatively well. And that's what I'm talking about. A game doesn't have to look super next gen in order to sell well, as long as the game plays well and you have fun playing it. And the graphics for this, though, remember, this is an older game, but here are the sprites. As you can tell, easily distinguishable from one another, even though a lot of them are palette swaps. Leon and Barry are up there. Leon's in blue, Barry's the gray. Lucia's the little girl that's in front of them. And then you have your zombies, and then you have the BOW at the end. All the zombies are distinguishable from one another due to their palette swaps, and the colors denote certain things. A green zombie is your normal zombie. The purple is a zombie that actually has the ability to poison you. Poison in this game, I don't remember if there was herbs or anything like that for healing poison. I believe there was some. But generally, the poison in the game would actually just damage you for a set amount of time, and then it would wear off. So you just have to stay alive that long. Let's see. Now, the creature at the far end is the tyrant-type creature for this story, and you will be facing him off and on in the game. I really did like these sprites. I think they were great, and, you know, for a Game Boy Color game, fantastic looking sprites. Alright, so besides what I felt were pretty good graphics, how does the game play? Much like the home console games, this is intended to be somewhat of a survival horror game that involves resource management. And I don't mean like, oh, you know, you only have so many slots, because something else different about this game is you actually had an infinite inventory. You could carry everything in the game and up to 99 of each item. So, handgun bolts, you could carry 99 handgun bolts at a time, all that kind of stuff. No, your inventory management comes from the fact that, you know, you don't always come across handgun bolts. You don't always come across the health item. So you have to manage how and when you're going to fight, or how and when you're going to heal. Much like Resident Evil did, but with a little bit more ease, since you didn't have to worry about, do I actually have an herb with me this time? The game exchanges a lot of the puzzle elements that are in the home console and the classic-style Resident Evil games with item-based exploration instead of puzzle-based exploration. What do I mean by that? Well, you'll come across at some point maybe a fire raging in a cabin door, and you can't get into the cabin, but there might be an item you need in there. Well, that means you have to find the fire extinguisher. Use the fire extinguisher, put out the fire, and now you can explore this new area. And it is only through backtracking and finding all those items that you're able to progress through the story. So there's no real puzzle element involved besides finding an item and going, ah, this item works with this door, like a crowbar and a stuck door. Those go together. So, that is how exploration is handled in this game. Most of the game takes place in a top-down style that I showed you earlier with the graphics when I was showing the sprites work and all that kind of stuff. And it is a departure from your fixed camera angles found in previous entries. Combat could be entered in two ways. Combat would be either caused by surprise, or not for you though. Surprise from you towards the enemies. This would occur by you aiming and firing your handgun, and then you would enter the battle scene. The other way battle would happen is that the enemies would get the drop on you instead, and then battle again. You could tell the difference between whether you were going to be surprising them or be surprised by what would be appearing in the bottom right corner of your screen. If you were doing the surprising, it would be a red exclamation mark. If you were being surprised, much like what you're going to see here, it would be a flashing yellow skull. So, battle was also handled very differently. You did not fight them in this top-down view. Instead, it would switch to a first-person view. You could only attack them in a specific way, but you could use any of 3 playable characters to do so. That's why you have the 3 spots down there that you see on the screen here. That would be Leon, Lucia, and Barry. And you'd have to have them equipped with a weapon, of course, to be able to attack, but to attack the enemies, you would have to press a button when your battle cursor was within the strike zone, which is located beneath the enemies. So, that's kind of a different way of playing the game, but to me that seems kind of cool. It makes me want to actually try the game out to just see how different it all is and have some fun with it. Other divergences, though, from normal Resident Evil gameplay is that there is the inclusion of armor as well. You can find, scattered throughout the game, pieces of armor that you could put on your characters, increasing their defense, and as such, decreasing the amount of damage that they would take if struck by an enemy. Okay, now, when you are exploring though, even if you have 3 characters in your party, only one will appear on the screen at any one time. And the last topic on my list, before we go too much further, is that the game would be played using a D-pad. There was no analog stick on your Game Boy Color systems. So, somewhat tank controls from a top-down perspective. Last thing to talk about, finally, the story for Resident Evil Gaiden. This game takes place on a luxury passenger ship at sea. And like the other games, is told in part via files you will find scattered aboard the ship, with the rest being told by narrative cutscenes. The story told begins with Barry Burton boarding the vessel, which has been beset by a viral outbreak. Now, the only reason why Barry has done so is to find Leon, who has gone silent since boarding this vessel himself. And they have, since the Raccoon City incident, begun working with a corporation called The Initiative, who's an anti-Umbrella group. So the Initiative sent Leon on board the ship in order to investigate rumors of a BOW being shipped by Umbrella across the sea in the liner. BOW, by the way, stands for Bioorganic Weapon, just in case you're ever curious. Upon discovering the outbreak, Barry makes it to a security room, and while viewing the cameras, he discovers a young girl is hiding and very much alive somewhere on the ship. She mentions that Leon hid her there and is investigating the rest of the ship and trying to find a way off of it. So Barry decides that he's going to go to this young girl and rescue her because she starts saying that there's a monster nearby and it's coming to get her, and she runs. Barry discovers the young girl, discovers the BOW, that big brownish gray guy that we saw on the sprites. They have a battle, and Barry wins, and he and the girl start exploring the ship together. Well, during exploration, it is discovered that the young girl has some kind of weird connection to the BOW and can sense when it is near. The two of them finally reunite with Leon, and shortly thereafter, the girl is kidnapped by the BOW. Lucia is off wherever with the creature. Meanwhile, Barry, who has reunited with Leon,
I'll pull you up.
They decide to go rescue her. They, of course, do so. And then the three of them face further hardships, including preventing the ship from sinking due to an explosion within the boiler room.
We promised to cooperate with each other.
Barry betrays Leon and Lucia by calling for Umbrella to come retrieve the girl and himself.
This is Rebecca, over.
He holds Leon off at gunpoint while boarding a submarine that Umbrella has sent. And then, while getting into the sub, or while in the sub,
No,
I'm not
sir,
sure, there
I
was
have not
a
found
little
it
bit
I'll continue to
of a
search
difficulty
for
for me trying to understand what was going on because it was jumping between the two
Rebecca.
stories. An explosion rocked the luxury
My
liner,
first
and
mission,
Leon
and
must
I've already
rush off
disobeyed
in
orders.
order to prevent the ship from sinking.
So much for my great law enforcement
And
career.
he ends up having to fight the
Probably
BOW
won't live long
in
enough to worry
the
about it.
bowels of the ship. And after you beat him,
just need
it
to know.
goes back to
I
Barry.
need to know the truth.
So we get to see what happens within the sub.
people?
We find out
I'm
while
not going to judge
we're
you.
playing as Barry that Barry
just
actually did
want
betray
to know the
Lucia
truth.
and Leon. He just wanted to trick Umbrella to get them away off the ship.
It was around this time last year.
But while on the sub, they discovered that it wasn't the BOW that Umbrella was shipping, it was Lucia herself. Lucia is the host to a parasite who can grow to become a full-sized BOW like you've been fighting on the ship within 10 days.
Located deep inside the jungle.
Barry forces some doctors to remove the parasite from Lucia, and they try to store it within a containment case. The case breaks, the monster escapes, and kills everyone on board except for Barry and Lucia. So all the crew are dead. Doing so causes it to mature, and it hides. Barry and Lucia take and navigate the ship back to the liner to go grab Leon, and while there, the BOW escapes back onto the liner.
Only there was no gorilla hiding.
So, the ship is nearly sunk, the BOW is on the loose, and it causes Lucia to fall into the water. The BOW follows, and then they both come back up, and now there's two Lucias. The BOW has the ability to shapeshift. Now, you do discover early on in the game that BOW, when you shoot it, bleeds green. So, Lucia, thinking quickly, grabs a knife and cuts her hand, showing Barry that she has red blood, meaning that's the real Lucia. You take out the BOW, you and Leon and Lucia board the sub and escape.
Do it!
But not without leaving a cliffhanger. M4 Limited stuck in one final cutscene, or narrative cutscene, whatever you want to call it, as they board the ship. Leon
Did you
has a cut on his
execute
face.
those innocent people?
And that cut.
Forget about it. Doesn't matter
bleeding
anymore.
green.
That was then, this is now. Besides,
So,
you said you wouldn't judge
part of the
me.
reason why Lucia doesn't realize that it looks
I'm
like
not
Leon is the
judging
original
you.
BOW
But
is the
it
fact that
does
upon
matter.
removing the parasite, she
Look,
lost her ability to
Now
sense
my
the
people
creature.
think you killed those MPs in the van. But I don't
Anyways,
think you did.
yeah, it's a fun little story.
Because those zombie
If it
dogs,
had been
right?
canon, that would have
When they
changed the
attacked the van,
whole
You were
layout
able
for how
to
number
escape.
4 would have played out.
Isn't
That
that
featured
right?
Leon. It wouldn't have been able to feature
You don't
Leon.
get it.
Leon's gone.
I've
He's
only
dead. He's a
got two
parasite.
choices left.
It would have been
Either
something else.
report to the Marines and serve out my sentence.
Anyways,
or keep on running
that
for as
is
long as I can.
Resident Evil Gaiden.
That's all.
If you're interested, look it up. There is some gameplay footage out there. The game, like I said, it appears fun. I might try to find a way to play it myself. But until next time, thank you very much for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you later. Bye.